In a moment, we're going to be talking with Brooks Agnew, who is going to the North Pole to look and see if there is indeed a hollow Earth. He's next on Coast to Coast AM. Well, raised in Pasadena, California, Dr. Brooks Agnew spent most of his youth hanging around Caltech, the folks who co-opt at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He entered the Air Force in 1973, where he became an electronics engineer, and after earning an honorable discharge, he attended Brigham Young in Western Kentucky and Tennessee Technological Universities. He's got a bachelor's degree in chemistry, master's in statistics, a PhD in physics, and he was a featured scientist in the 1997 Wendy Robbins documentary on HARP, Holes in Heaven. Currently a consultant to the manufacturing industry. Brooks Agnew, our guest on Coast to Coast. Hey, Brooks, how are you? Welcome back.
Oh, I'm doing so good, George. Great to be back.
This is going to be a fun discussion with you. I might even hold you an extra hour for some phone calls, because I understand you're going on a little expedition, aren't you?
Well, yes. In the summer of last year, I joined an expedition of individuals who were getting ready to go to the North Pole to explore to see if it was hollow or not, and I was on the team to build a gyroscope and do some headspace analysis of seawater, and fully prepared to contribute in that capacity. In August, I went up to James Gilliland's ranch up in Trout Lake, Washington.
Oh, yeah.
And I had an experience. I have never had an ET experience, never seen a UFO in my life, but that weekend, that conference changed me. I went there to speak, and I came away believing once and for all we're not alone in the universe, but something else happened.
I'm supposed to go up there myself, Brooks. I haven't planned it yet, but I've got to get up there. You know, I went to Portland and Seattle, and that's as close as I've been. I should have just spent an extra couple days. I've never seen a UFO, and they guarantee me that I'm going to see something that day.
Well, I don't know about the guarantee, but I know stimulus and response, and we did what's known as a CE5 protocol using lasers and intention, and we got 2 separate stimulus and response activities within about 3 minutes, which I recorded, and it was quite amazing.
Now, you know, we have had on this program over the last several months a couple of guests who've talked about the hollow earth theory, the pros, the cons. What's your take on this, Brooks?
Well, it's interesting. I have read a lot of books. I've listened to a lot of conjecture. And as an engineer and a scientist, I went through all the textbooks and all the writings and found out that no one had actually been there. Everybody was just sort of speculating or using their imagination or using existing geological information. And so I decided to join the expedition to do some serious science, to see if real measurements could be made, to see if the Earth is made the way they think it's made.
Now, what kind of technology is going to be going out that way on this expedition?
Well, that's interesting. Of course, there are 3 things that we're really looking for. We're looking for an impression or a depression in the sea. That is to say, the ocean isn't round all the way around the planet. There are places where gravity is low. For some reason. We don't know why. We don't know if the crust is thin or if it's a magnetic anomaly, but tankers and shipping companies that frequent these areas talk about a depression in the ocean. They can feel it, but it's very difficult to see because you really don't have enough perspective on the ocean. You only can see about 8 or 10 miles because of the circumference, the curvature of the Earth. So, and GPS units don't really work that high very well for altitude. They work fine for 2-dimensional measurements or for navigation for aircraft, but not so well for sea level measurements. And you really can't go by the ocean floor because the ocean floor may contour as well, and the ocean's about 4,200 meters deep at that point. So it's going to take some special instruments to be able to detect this depression. We're going to try and measure it for the first time, and that's going to be a very important discovery, geologically speaking. And the second is that if there is an inner Earth opening, then the seawater going in and out of that opening is going to have some different properties, different salinity, different marine life, different pH. We're going to try to measure all that as well. We'll be tracking it as we go into this area, which by historians have been determined to be, and I'm talking about going all the way back to the year 1400, coming forward with great scientists like Edmund Halley and others, that this is where the location is. So we're going to take measurements, and if we don't find anything, it's still going to make a great expedition, a great documentary. But if we do find something, well, that's going to change everything.
Well, the late Admiral Richard Byrd apparently went into the hollow earth and came out with some incredible stories. And we'll talk about that in a second, Brooks. But let's go back to those 1400s, that period. What did some people say about these possibilities?
Well, that's a good question. The builders of Roslin Chapel in Roslin, Scotland.
Yes.
I went there a couple summers ago, spent 5 or 6 hours in there taking photographs, and when I was going back through the photographs, I looked up in one of the ceiling shots that I had, and there was a very ornate carving, came down right over the altar in the front of the chapel. I had to actually lay on my back on the altar to take the shot. And there it was, right in the middle of the screen, a hollow earth with an inner sun. And this was built in 1442. Then we go to Egypt, and there are plenty of records of an alternate or a higher dimensional aspect to the inner earth. And then there are legends in Shasta of a city called Telos underneath that mountain, and others. And of course, many channelers, which I kind of take that stuff with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that it's not happening, but as a scientist, I have to really go on hard data if I can get it.
Well, now Byrd talked about some incredible things. He claimed that his plane was basically met by a flying craft, that they safely brought him down, that he met leaders of the hollow earth. It's an incredible story. I mean, absolutely startling. Do you believe, if it exists, Brooks, do you believe that our government or governments on this planet are fully aware of this?
Well,
how could they
sometimes I facetiously say that, if our government has discovered that there's an opening and another society or another civilization, another ecology in the center of our Earth, I'm sure that they would disclose it to the public. Of course, I say that tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, exactly.
In February of last year, the government issued what's called the Data Denial Act, and it applies to the polar satellites that go over the north and south poles of our globe. They have restricted the real-time data from the EUMETSAT METCOP of the MEDOP satellites. They will not release any photographic data from above or the 60th parallels in the north or south of the Earth. So basically all we have is a center shot, just for weather purposes only, of our planet. We don't have any publicly available photos of the North Pole.
How will you know if you're in it? I mean, it's got that kind of circumference movement to it. I mean, you go right into it. You won't even know it, like Byrd flew into it.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think with an aircraft, there is a possibility of flying into this, especially he was flying at very low altitude relative to today's aircraft.
True, yeah.
We don't fly much below 10,000 feet when we're going up there. Byrd was flying at about 2,500 feet sometimes, and it would have been possible, just what we call IFR, I-fly roads, to fly along the circumference of the Earth and fly into a hole. Now, it's also reported by many that if there is a society that lives in there, that they protect that hole, that they actually have a way of masking it with a mirage.
Really? Well, how big do you think the opening is?
Well, a couple of our historians say it could be as small as 80 miles across or as large as 500 miles across.
How do you mask something like that, Brooks?
Well, when you're flying at 30 or 40,000 feet over it, or as our satellites do, about 240 miles, it's pretty easy to mask. Not many aircraft fly low altitude over that area. Now, we do have some photographs from some ice-based expeditions that happened several years ago, and they were